that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
If you recently became a Drag Race fan, I genuinely don't know how to explain what this fandom felt like in 2015. So I wanted to take you back in time to an era that is now out of reach for all of us, yet also very interesting to look back on in retrospect. But before we start,
are you someone that has an online following or is trying to build one? Well, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the super easy platform that helps you build a website without the stress. Whether you're a creator, a business owner, or just want to share your work online, Squarespace has everything you need to get your site up and running in no time. You might think that it's hard to make your own website from scratch, but with Squarespace, it doesn't have to be. Their drag and drop builder and sleek professional templates make it simple to create a site that fits your vision. No coding skills required. Pick a design, tweak it to match your style, and you're good to go. Although what really sets Squarespace apart, it's its integration system. Everything you need to run your site is in one place. If you're selling products or services, Squarespace Payments lets you quickly set up a store and offer payment options like Apple Pay, Klarna, and Afterpay. Want to grow your brand? Their SEO tools help your site show up in more searches, bringing in the right people. Ready to take your website to the next level? Click the link in the description, and once you're ready to go public, get 10% off your first website or domain. Now, let's begin.
The year 2015 was a particularly weird point in the evolution of the series, because by that point, the show had already become popular enough that it felt super important, but also still niche enough that it also felt like a cool little secret that mostly gay fans and Tumblr girls knew about. Even when it came to how queens interacted with the fandom, there was a lot more of a genuineness that would sort of get lost as the years went by. I mean, at that point in time, the queens that were putting out merch were extremely few and far between. If anything, I remember only seeing names like Alaska or Alyssa Edwards having functioning websites where they were pushing out some of their merch. As opposed to now where as soon as the season drops, the whole cast has their own merch that they try to get fans to buy. When it came to social media, the landscape was also vastly different. The biggest one probably being that TikTok was not around in 2015, something that would largely dominate when we got into the 2020s decade. Back then, the governing forces of the online fandom were either Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, or Facebook. Tumblr also existed and was pretty popular with the fan base. There was also a live streaming service called Periscope that was essentially the first big streaming platform. This was of course before Instagram and other apps started incorporating live streaming into their software too. Interestingly enough, there was queens like Katya, Trixie, Miss Fame that tried building their YouTube channels around the airing of season 7, with Katya's very famous Reflections and Regrets series. Yet it would still take so many years before there began to be an influx in future contestants that would try to build their platforms outside of the show too. Yet even back then, it wasn't completely out of the ordinary for queens to try to market themselves to the fan base. In the year 2015, the playing field was a lot more even, with opportunities being pretty manageable for Ru girls to obtain. For instance, there wasn't countless international editions all around the world. So if pride events / clubs in the UK, Canada, or any other country that wanted a Drag Race queen, they would have to book one of the American queens, which at the time was a list of less than 100 queens, as opposed to now where there's almost 1,000 queens globally to select from. Not just that though, there was also only one season a year coming out, and that was from the main franchise. This highlights the fact that All Stars hadn't become a yearly thing. Instead, All Stars 1 came out in 2012 and was a huge flop. So by the time we got to 2015, it's this same year that in the summer, World of Wonder announced that they would begin the production of All Stars 2 and asked the fans to vote for the contestants that they would most like to see return to their screens. All Stars 2 felt like a mythological experience because of the fact that these weren't just top contenders from their original season. They were queens that had managed to build a huge career for themselves outside of the show and had a lasting impact on the legacy of the current fandom that was actively expanding. These were All Stars, and with the news that they would no longer be following that horrible All Stars 1 teams format, it made it all the more exciting that we'd finally be getting a proper format. and what many to this day consider to be the real first All-Stars of the franchise. Even if Alaska's ex-boyfriend ended up leaking most of the elimination order online as a way to get back at Alaska. Speaking of, when it came to spoiler culture, it was not all that prevalent. Sure, maybe there was some tea here and there over who most likely would make the finale, or some shocking elimination. But they tended to be very rare, lacked a lot of details, and even if they seemed believable, they often kept this presence as just a random rumor rather than something that was 100% factual. The platform of Reddit was the governing place in terms of the diehard fanbase. That was where you'd be able to find the latest tea on any queen drama or any new up-and-coming seasons that were in production. Another aspect of the 2015 era is that the fanbase believed more in the imaginary rules that we thought Drag Race followed, just based on the precedents that they had established year after year. For instance, the diehard fans were aware that when it came to the queens who made the top 3, it would always be the person that had the best overall track record who would win the crown. Or if a queen lip syncs for their life for a third time and is up against someone that's only landing there for their first or second, then most likely it will be the queen lip syncing for the third time that would have to be going home. But those rules would start to get blurred as time went by. 2015 becomes even more monumental because not only did we get season 7 along with an announcement of All Stars 2, but we also got the very first RuPaul's Drag Con that took place in May 2015, becoming a huge success and really cementing this ecosystem that they were building around all these queens. Suddenly, their legacies were coming together to help create a place like DragCon, where all the diehard fans could attend, and the queens were the true star of the space. To being able to see a much bigger picture of the influence that they were having on the next generation. Now, while there was a lot of success for most Ru girls around this time, that's not to say that there wasn't some exceptions. With every new cast, there was definitely 2 or 3 queens that would end up, quote, being forgotten from most of the general fanbase's attention. Yet even the Kia queens were being able to find this new exposure that was actually giving them long-lasting impacts in terms of their career trajectory. At the same time, there was also a tension in the air, and it was that maybe the show wasn't gonna last forever. After all, in 2015, the main network was still Logo TV, so anytime it got renewed, it felt like we were running on borrowed time. That being said, when it came to the cast, they were always filled with full-fledged drag queens rather than the fanboy type of personalities that we get in modern editions. A very interesting aspect of this time period is how it started to influence nightlife culture itself, especially when it came to how drag scenes would organize themselves in cities across the country. In drag communities like that of New York City or West Hollywood, while yes, there was dozens of queens trying to make a name for themselves, there was also a hierarchy that was being followed. At the top of the hierarchy were the legends in the city, the queens that had been around for over a decade, and they had all these big bookings, so everyone in the city knew them. As the years went by though, it all started to shift, because the queens at the top of the hierarchy would start getting cast on Drag Race, and then would end up touring around the world for the next couple of years, which would then allow the local queens who were next in line to rise to the top, start to gain their own popularity and attention in the city, and eventually get on Drag Race themselves. But what this did was that at one point, the queens at the top of the chain were no longer the OGs that had been around for over a decade. Instead, it sort of ended up destroying the hierarchy entirely. Now it was the Ru girls that were getting booked and getting all the praise, while at the same time, local queens had now exploded in inhabitants, and suddenly everyone was just at the same level. If you weren't a Ru girl, you were just another queen in New York City, Los Angeles, or any city around the country. It's important to note that when we talk about how Drag Race birthed many generations, we mean it literally. A fan in 2026 who is 18 years old was literally just 7 years old in 2015. It's a testament to the magic that this franchise has established in the queer world. there are still newer people being introduced to the drag world, and it's a perspective that even I am curious about, because I'm someone that saw the show evolve to what it is now. So the idea of being a recent fan that only started tuning in a couple years ago makes me curious as to the perception that those individuals have towards what they think makes the show so good, or the queens that they view as icons, as well as the sense of magic that they experience from the series. Perhaps some of you watching this are some of those same people, so make sure to comment below and tell me about your experience. The series really starts to change a lot when they get into the double-digit seasons, and the switch to bigger networks like VH1 or MTV. You know how RuPaul often says to queens that you don't have to reinvent the wheel and you should instead sometimes just focus on the things that work? Well, that's something that I think the production of this series should apply to themselves. If they simply allowed storylines to flow naturally, the quality and entertainment would skyrocket. Nowadays, they focus way too much in trying to micromanage every single aspect of the competition, or introducing weird formats that don't really add much overall value to the episodes. Perhaps taking a step back and approaching things the way they used to could end up giving back that feel of classic Drag Race. In that same respect, you know how I've said many times that back then there was literally less than 100 contestants who had been on the show? Well, not only did it translate in more bookings available, but it also meant that when it came to the fan favorite queens, they felt super massive. Their star power really carried so much weight with it. Valentina, Katya, Alyssa, they earned this presence that was not easy to replicate. And that legendary X factor would not have been the same if these queens had been introduced during the modern era of the series. With almost 1,000 queens to choose from, it's even more difficult for a queen that has all it takes to be a star to actually become one. Yet, that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that back in 2015, things were truly set up in a way that if you could get on the season, you truly were set for the rest of the decade. They were big fish in a small pond, and now that pond has expanded and there's several big fish in that same pond. That does sort of highlight my next point, and it's that even what we viewed as a success was different in 2015. Touring different clubs was viewed as a long-term career path. I know that now they tend to say that you have to build something sustainable, but back then, it really was. If you went on Drag Race in 2015 for your original season and made it at least halfway through, you solidified a high booking rate, not just for that year, but also the year that followed, the year after that, and so on. There wasn't that many Ru girls out there, but there was a lot of demand for them. So yeah, sure, maybe the demand went down a little bit with every new cast of queens that came out, but it was only 12 new girls every year. So it was a very small adjustment to make every 12 months. Furthermore, even the idea of how far a queen's career could reach felt like uncharted territory. Obviously, queens that got on the show, especially the ones that would end up taking the crown, felt like superstars to us. Yet there was still so many achievements that would be made that felt groundbreaking at the time, such as Bianca Del Rio managing to do a whole solo stand-up tour at an international scale, or Violet Chachki going on to be invited to highly acclaimed fashion runways and working with A-list designers. It showed how the reach of RuPaul's Drag Race now had creatives in all different fields. This meant that opportunities were endless in terms of where a queen could end up landing. That brings us to another aspect of how the fan base evolved. Because back in 2015, there was a lot more focus being made in discussions online about the actual show itself. Think of it this way. We had a catalog that consisted of seasons 1 to 7 and then All Stars 1. So people were often sharing their favorite lip syncs, talking about some of the runways, crazy fights that happened in Untucked, favorite winners, who they thought deserved to go further, etc. We were all living for the fantasy. And that's something that's a lot different today, where oftentimes, while clips are constantly being shared of people's favorite moments, there's also a lot more conversations that's dominated by topics like how the producers do stuff behind the scenes, that everything is rigged for someone, etc. This can be attributed to the fact that as Drag Race grew, more parts of the fan base started to get interconnected. Suddenly, even though Reddit was the only place where the super diehard fans could access the few rumors or spoilers for an upcoming season, that would quickly start to change. Suddenly, there was more Instagram accounts that were sharing the tea from Reddit, and there was YouTube channels that were devoting themselves to sharing that same type of content. What this did was essentially echo things like spoilers or production meddling that was often only discussed by the superfans that would go on Reddit, and it was now being communicated through easy and commonly used platforms like YouTube, where casual fans of the show could now also get the tea. So maybe it's through that the general conversations that the fanbase has and the way people interact with the show has largely been influenced by them now being too hyper aware or paranoid of how things that transpire on a season happen, rather than focusing on the content itself. Beyond that, an important element during this time period was the fact that since there was only one season per year, there was almost 10 months that we would call the off season, where things were pretty scarce when it came to new content. This meant that the online demand was insane, to the point that within weeks of Queens being announced to the world, new casts were often already crossing into the hundreds of thousands of followers on platforms like Instagram. There was also a clear rawness to the way that Queens handled themselves online. While there's still a lot of Queens that aren't afraid to be unfiltered, it's to a certain degree where even the most scandalous of tweets now are a lot more contained compared to some of the things that we would have seen posted 10 years ago. When it comes to what I learned from putting this video together, there's no longer any time for there to be cultural moments or a lasting legacy. I think that might be my personal takeaway when I was putting all of this together, because it's true. There's no longer any time for there to be cultural moments or a lasting legacy. In 2015, memes lasted longer, Queens had time to grow and evolve, seasons marinated culturally because we were actually able to absorb everything that happened. But flash forward to 2026 and everything is just instant, optimized, and replaced immediately by a new season. The modern fandom consumes Drag Race faster than it remembers it. And what that's gonna end up causing, at least for a good portion of viewers, is that editions are just gonna start to blend together. Suddenly, if you start remembering seasons 17, 18, or 19, it'll feel weak. It'll feel like it lacks substance. But when you remember the older seasons, there's a sense of richness. Like you know that every episode of those seasons were TV gold. Regardless, while things were different back in 2015, without this amazing evolution, all the way through internet culture and how the fan base is now all over the world and there's dozens of different franchises, it's a blessing that things were able to get to this size of momentum. But what do you think? Were you around the fan base in 2015? If so, how do you remember it? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video.
I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Sari Tish, Las Potitas, Cool Gal Nan, Jet Sam Adams, and Natasha De Leon. And in the Gay Squad, we have Lone Resident, Christine Gregory. And in the Green Squad, we have Cayman Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, The Only Sean, IJS, Not a Punch, But a Keek, Jack Beck, Galeria Gomez, Sarah G, Scarlet Rose, Boiled Peanut, Not an Omelet, But an Egg, Max Whale, Dea, Dea, and Niall O'Hearn. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. I'll see you guys next time.